Hello, and welcome back to what is somehow the 10th episode of Greek Speak, so we have hit double digits. This setup is a little bit different from normal, so I'm sorry in advance if the audio is weirder than normal. This week we are talking about Hermes, one of my favorite gods. All of them are my favorite gods. So to start off, like every other Olympian, Hermes is the son of Zeus, particularly the son of Zeus and Maia, who is a nymph. He was born in Arcadia, which is a section of the Peloponnese. It's like northwest, sort of. It's right next to the where the Peloponnese connects to mainland Greece. He is the god of travelers, merchants, thieves, and anybody who uses the roads. He's also the archetype trickster god. He's also the messenger of Zeus. So a lot of the myths that he shows up in, he's just doing Zeus's bidding. Love that. So he pops up in multiple hero stories when Zeus needs to talk directly to the heroes. Like he pops up in the Odyssey a couple times. He pops up in Perseus and Medusa. He pops up in the Aeneid. He has multiple children, but two that are particularly of importance are his son Pan, who is the god of wild places. If you know anything about Percy Jackson, you know that the god Pan, went missing at some point, quote unquote. If you want a better explanation than that, read the Percy Jackson series, which I will always say you should do. His other son is Hermaphroditus, which is his son. Is Hermes' son with Aphrodite, so they have both Hermes and Aphrodite in the name. And then eventually, Hermaphroditus nymph falls in love with him, and he gets into this pool, and this nymph is like, "Hey, I want to not be separated from you ever." And so, through some weird divine magic, they become one person, and so he becomes the first hermaphrodite, which is where we get that word. It also has connection to Hermes' idea of like the boundary god, which we'll get to in a minute. His main attributes are his winged sandals, his caduceus. It's sometimes just a stick, just a wand. A caduceus is specifically a staff with two snakes wrapped around it. And also his cap, which might be a traveler's cap because it's brimmed typically, and that would keep the sun out of your face. He also sometimes has a beard, sometimes doesn't. Kind of depends on the pottery and the art style. Also, what aspect of Hermes you're worshipping. So he has four pretty important. So he has Argophantes, which is Argus Slayer, which is just like a cool name in general. It also ties back directly to a myth. Long story short, Zeus had another affair. And to hide it from Hera, he turned his lover into a cow. And then Hera found the cow and was like, "Hey, I want the cow." And so Zeus gave her the cow, and she put one of her servants named Argus in charge of the cow. And Zeus kind of goes, "Oh crap, I feel guilty," and sends Hermes to slay Argus, who has 100 eyes. And Hermes puts him to sleep and kills him. And then Hera puts him on the eyes of, or like the feathers of a peacock, which is why peacocks look the way they do. He also has Enotus, which is of the road, which kind of goes back to he's the god of everybody who uses the roads. He also has Epimelius, which is of the flock. The Homeric hymn to Hermes talks about him stealing Apollo's cattle, and he also makes the lyre, which once Apollo figures out what Hermes did, he's not happy. Hermes is also like hours old at this point. And so Hermes is like, "Hey, if you don't kill me, I'm gonna give you this sweet ass instrument I invented, and also can like my mom and I have some honor on Olympus." It's great. Also, there's a theory. There's not a theory. There's a kind of just a collective, like, yeah, that happened, of Apollo being representing the like aristocracy in the higher class kind of thing. And so, since Hermes is god of the lower class, then it's like a leveling out of the playing field, which connects to the rise of democracy in 5th century Athens and stuff like that. Hephaestus, who we'll get to in a couple weeks, also kind of represents this of being the working class and all that jazz. The last one that's really important, the last epithet that's important, is psychopomp, which is a pretty normal word in today's society. So that is just, he is the escorter of souls in that regard. If you look at the vase of the death of Sarpedon, there's Sarpedon's body, and then there's Hermes' death and sleep. And so he, in that vase, is taking on the role of Hermes Psychopomp. So in his role as Psychopomp, he's also used a lot with the dead, which, yeah, that makes sense. We have clay inscriptions on tablets of people invoking the name of Hermes if they want to use black magic. Because, black magic, you need the dead to do that. Hermes is the one that guides the dead to this world and the next world. And that's a more chthonic aspect. And in most iterations of the the Persephone and Hades myth, he's the one who leads Persephone out of the underworld. So many names. One of his biggest festivals in Athens, this is specific to Athens, is the Anasteria? And it's an Athenian festival to Dionysus. And the idea is there's death in the city. The first day they invoke the dead, the citizens of Athens invoke the dead, and then the second day they bring in the new wine, and then the third day everybody leaves, kind of thing. And so it's death and booze and connection with past relatives and stuff like that. So yeah, Hermes plays a role in that because he escorts the dead to Athens and then back to the underworld once the festival is over. Now we get to one of my favorite things about the Greeks. They put penises on everything. I'm not kidding. So there are these things called Hermes in Greek history. And they started out as just these piles of stones that were just markers between like polises and, if you get to this one, you're 10 miles from Athens kind of thing. And Rome has this too. And they get to the idea that it's like an embodiment of Hermes. And so eventually it shifts to a block of stone. And it's, again, associated with boundaries and directions like Hermes is, because it's the road. And Hermes is a liminal boundary, both physically and society and all that stuff. So he's with his son Hermaphroditus. There's a boundary between gender, between physical places, and then in some aspects, like adulthood and childhood. So we'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, so eventually the Hermes swapped just into a block of stone that was carved to have Hermes' head on it and a penis, and it was always erect. Because why not? It is ichthyophallic because there's a penis on it. And it's also apotropaic, which just kind of prevents it from harm. And the idea is like repels like. So if it's going, so like the Gorgon is also an apotropaic source. So the Gorgon is an evil thing, so it's going to repel evil spirits. Kind of the same thing, but I don't think the Greeks thought the penises were evil. I don't know. This is also connected to sheep and goat fertility because Hermes is also a guardian of the flocks because of that whole stealing Apollo's cattle thing. So I mentioned that he is kind of an idea of like in between adulthood and childhood, and he's particularly in that for boys, especially on athletics. One of his aspects is a beardless youth, which definitely, because the Greeks thought once you had a beard, you're a man. So if he's an older youth that doesn't have a beard, he's just like right in the middle of childhood and adulthood. He's not a god of initiation, but he is tied into initiation through that. So that is Hermes. he is one of my favorite gods. Just because he's the one that matches up with the least amount of the least amount of bad qualities with the most amount of good slash neutral qualities. As always, we have the Instagram and all that jazz. And as always, if there's a myth you want me to talk about in particular, leave it down in the comments. Have a nice week.